Now, I've been a patent examiner for 7 years, and I handle patent applications in the area of bio and medical technology. So this year, I've been given the opportunity to pick a topic. And in this current climate, I think that clinical trials will be a topic of interest to many. So the number of clinical trials conducted has, on average, been on an uptrend. And for the past 20 years, the United States is the country where most trials are conducted. However, in recent years, there has been a very sharp growth in the number of trials conducted in China. So in 2019, both the US and China had over 9,000 trials listed in the WHO International Clinical Trial Register. Now, with so many trials taking place all around the world, do you know there's actually a dilemma that exists between clinical trial information and getting that grant for a patent? Now, at the end of my presentation, you'll better understand this catch-22 situation and how one can take steps to try to mitigate or maybe avoid this situation altogether. So these are the topics I will cover today. First, I will explain the dilemma. We will then briefly go through the various types of clinical trial information that could pose as a stumbling block to getting that patent. I will then touch on 2 cases that were concluded just last year in 2020. And point 4, I will explain the evaluation of a clinical trial protocol by patent examiners in Singapore. And point 5, preventive steps that may be taken to avoid this situation altogether. So let us go straight to point 1. So this picture actually depicts the regular journey of a potential drug. Now the drug will first undergo preclinical trials, and these are usually tests conducted in animals or on cells. Now the preclinical trial takes about 3 to 4 years to complete, and usually only about 5 in 5,000 drugs would move on to the clinical trial stage. Now clinical trials are tests done on human volunteers and can be divided into 4 phases. Now each phase actually has a different purpose. The focus of phase 1 is on safety, whereby it's the phase that safe dosages are determined and side effects identified. Phase 2 is where effectiveness of the drug is tested. Phase 3 further verifies the effectiveness of the drug compared to other standard treatments. And after phase 3, all the clinical trial collected thus far will be submitted to the relevant authorities. For example, in Singapore, it will be HSA, and they will review this clinical trial data. And if all is good, they will actually give approval for the drug to be sold in the market. Now, phase 4 is more of a post-market surveillance to check on the long-term risk versus the benefit of the drug. And in many countries, it's a requirement to register the clinical trial before commencing the trial. So depending on the trial conditions and also the jurisdiction where the trial is conducted, there is a possibility to commence phase 1 of the clinical trial without registration. However, at the very latest, by phase 2, registration will be required. Now, this clinical trial register is like a public register, whereby details of the trial, such as the protocol, can be easily retrieved by the public. Now, as we know, there are actually several requirements for patentability, and one of them is support. So medical use claims must be supported by evidence of the likely efficacy of the substance or composition in therapy. What it means is that you need to show proof that the drug does what it's supposed to do. So based on the clinical trial phases that I've described earlier, the efficacy data would have been obtained in phases 2 and phase 3. Now, if the results are good, the pharmaceutical company would usually then proceed to file for a patent application using this robust set of data as support for the drug's efficacy. However, if you recall, information about the trial would have already been made publicly available via the clinical trial register. And so herein lies the problem. When should a patent application be filed? Now, if I file before commencing the clinical trial, I will not have the robust clinical trial data to support my medical claims. And if I file after getting the efficacy data, the public register bearing details of the trial could be a potential prior art document. So it seems that in this case, I can't file early, nor can I file later. And if I don't register for the clinical trial, I'm legally not allowed to commence the trial. And so this is the problem. Let me move on to the next point and share with you various sources of clinical trial information that have been used as prior documents. Now, in the clinical trial register itself, you can find a protocol, and for some, you can also find results. There are also other ways by which clinical trial information can become public. For example, in in the informed consent provided to the participants and in the form of take-home tablets for administration of the drug at home. Now, today I'll be focusing on point A. I will not cover points C and D. However, what I've done is to include the key decisions here for your own reading. Now, for point B, the disclosure is actually more severe than point A. And so once I've gone through point A, you will most probably know what happens when you encounter point B. So let us start with the first case law, which was concluded in February 2020 in Korea. Now, the claim in question relates to a pharmaceutical combination for use in neoadjuvant treatment of early-stage HER2-positive breast cancer. And the combination comprises 4 drugs: pertuzumab, trastuzumab, docetaxel, and carboplatin. Now, the prior art in question is a phase 2 clinical trial protocol. The background of this case is that the patent examiner, in view of the phase 2 protocol, rejected the claims as lacking novelty and inventiveness. Now, the IPTAB affirmed the examiner's conclusion. However, upon reaching the patent court, there was a 180-degree turn of events, and the IPTAB's decision was overturned, and the claim eventually granted. So let us look at the decision in slightly more detail. Now, on a point of novelty, the clinical trial protocol, which is the key prior art document, disclosed the same 4 drugs for the same purpose as the current patent application. However, no results were included in the prior art document. Now, the IPTAB argued that it doesn't matter that the results are not included because the pharmacological effect is merely an inherent property of the drug combination. However, the patent court was of the view that just the protocol alone is actually insufficient for the skilled person to objectively affirm the pharmacological effect of the drug combination. And hence, the protocol was deemed as different from the claim invention, and the claim is regarded as novel. Now, on a point of inventive step, in the view of the IPTAB, since the protocol is a phase 2 protocol, there is clear potential for the skilled person to try this combination. However, the patent court thought otherwise, as there was actually no prior art available showing the efficacy of the drug combination. Additionally, the drug combination actually showed markedly superior results compared to other known combinations. And so this synergistic effect was not easily predicted, and the claim was considered to contain an inventive step. Hence, for this particular case, and in this jurisdiction, was the clinical trial protocol detrimental? Actually, eventually, it was not detrimental, as the claims were granted. So let us now head to down under to Australia in Milan versus SunFarmer. There were actually several patents in suit. However, I'll be focusing on the 711 patent, which comprises Swiss type claims and method of treatment claims. They are directed to the treatment or prevention of retinopathy via the use of fenofibrate. Now, the document of contention is actually the ACCORD-I study protocol. This protocol is nothing about the use of fenofibrate. So this protocol was actually just a very broad-based study examining the effects of several factors such as blood glucose, blood pressure, triglycerides on diabetic retinopathy. However, there was one reference in the study protocol to a previous study known as ETDRS-18, which included a hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis was that the risk of diabetic retinopathy could be reduced by administration of fibrate in patients who had already achieved adequate glycemic control. So this was just a hypothesis. It was not tested at all. Let us move to the background of the case. So since 2015, Milan had sold fenofibrate in Australia. Now, in the following year, SunFarmer made its entrance into the Australian market with Ranbaxy. So Milan, who was obviously unhappy with the sudden competition, proceeded to sue SunFarmer. And this is where the real saga begins, because the primary judge not only dismissed Milan's case on threatened infringement, the primary judge also invalidated Milan's claims in the 711 patent. And the claims were actually judged to lack both a novelty and inventiveness. And so Milan appealed. Let us look at the details. Now, starting with the primary judge, a reverse infringement test was used. So the use of fibrate in accordance with the ACCORD protocol would clearly infringe each of the method of treatment claims in the 711 patent. And so the method of treatment claims were deemed to lack novelty. Now, similarly, the Swiss type claims were also deemed as invalid in light of the protocol. Now, Milan then proceeded to argue that the key disclosure was nothing but a hypothesis. The federal court then stated that the key question to ask is whether the information disclosed in the document is sufficiently specific and complete to be equal to the invention that is later claimed. Now, the full court agreed that the protocol did indeed disclose this information specifically and completely, and so the claim was said to lack novelty. Now, in this particular case, in this jurisdiction, was the clinical trial protocol detrimental? In this case, yes, it was detrimental as the claims were invalidated. So after looking at seemingly two opposite ends of the spectrum, the outcomes, so let me share with you how patent examiners in Singapore evaluate a clinical trial protocol as a prior art document. Now, here is a hypothetical standard Swiss type claim. So use of a composition comprising 50 milligrams of drug X in the manufacture of a medicament for the treatment of disease Z, where the medicament is to be administered orally once daily. Now, we have a prior art D1, and D1 is a clinical trial protocol without any clear data showing therapeutic efficacy. For this case, we actually regard the claim as novel, as we are of the view that since there is no proof or any data showing that X is able to treat Z, the prior art does not anticipate the Swiss type claim. Now, for inventive step, these are our considerations. So first, D1 actually teaches the exact protocol claimed. Now, second, there is no teaching away from using X to treat Z in any other prior art document. As such, it's considered that a skilled person would follow the protocol in D1 and arrive at the claimed invention easily. Hence, in this particular scenario, would examiners in Singapore see the protocol as detrimental? And well, the claim, although regarded novel, will actually be considered to lack inventive step in this particular scenario. So after a whirlwind tour of Korea, Australia, and a touch of Singapore, what point am I getting at? Okay, what I want to say is that traversing this issue is quite complicated. It's akin to navigating through a maze. And when you make a turn, you could be met with a dead end or an open path. So the outcome actually hinges on multiple factors, including the country where the trials are held. And so the regulatory requirements of the clinical trial would differ. There's also the degree of enforcement they can consider. It also depends on where the patent application is filed, and so the laws would differ. And naturally, the facts of the case will play a critical role, just to name a few factors. And so what I would suggest, hence, is to avoid this situation where possible by taking some preventive steps. I think if one can do so, I believe that time, money, and effort can be saved for all parties involved in the patent process. So based on the case laws that I've just read, here are a few preventive steps I would suggest. Number one would be to try to file for provisional patent application before registering a clinical trial. Now, for support requirement on the medical use, include in the filed application preclinical trial data as evidence of efficacy. Point two will be to be more aware of the clinical trial information given to clinical trial participants. While transparency is important, not all details may be necessary, so be aware and carefully select and control the information that's given out. Next will be to sign confidentiality agreements with the participants. Where possible, study medicaments should be given on-site. And where it's not possible, all unused medicines need to be promptly returned. Now, points 2 and 5 relate to the other types of clinical trial information, specifically C and D, that I've not covered today. But once you've read the case laws that I have appended as links in the reading materials, all these points will click in place, and you will understand the rationale behind points 2 to 5. Also, we have many brilliant minds here, so I'm sure you can all come up with even more suggestions. Now, what I presented today is but a very brief and small snippet on the impact of clinical trial information on patentability. So as you can see, just this small snippet is a problem enough. So let me end up by saying that where possible, take preventive steps, and hopefully this situation may be altogether avoided. Thank you.